video is going to review series and sequences, and then also rectangular and polar coordinates and parametric equations to get you ready for the exam. Gonna start with number 26. Okay, and this is where you really need to know the difference between converge and diverge. Converge means it's almost like it has a limit. It's going to go to a number and stop. Diverge means that it's going to get bigger forever. And you can tell this is a linear function. Starts at 1, goes to infinity, and we're adding. That's what the sum means. So this is going to just continue to get big and big and huge. So this is definitely a diverge. If you look at number 27, you can see how these numbers are getting smaller and smaller and smaller. This would converge. Okay, and the next one we're going to look at is number 27. I can tell that this is geometric, and I can tell that my R is a negative 1/6. So I want the sum of the infinite sequence. So let's see, that's your first term over 1 minus your R. So that's 36 over 7/6. That's 216 over 7. And that formula is on your formula sheet. Next one we're going to go to is number 51. Okay. And number 51 says how many terms of the sequence must be added together for it to equal 3,280. So I want the sum to be, I'm going to look at this and I know that it's geometric and that my R is 3 because I'm multiplying by another 3 each time. It's going to stop because I end up having a definite sum and it's getting bigger and bigger and bigger, so it can't be an infinite. So I'm going to use this formula, which again is on your formula sheet. There's my first term. We said my R was 3. I don't know my N. The 1's not really doing anything. If there's another number there, you would just divide it over. So that kind of gives me this, 1 minus 3 to the N over a negative 2. And then I would multiply both sides by negative 2. And that gives me negative 6,560. And then I would subtract the 1. So negative 6,561. I cannot divide by 3. This is not 3 times n. I can divide by this negative in the front. But now that I'm here, again, you cannot divide by 3 because this is exponential, so you're going to snail it with a log. So log base 3 of 6561 equals n, and then you can just tall small this, and you get 8. So lots of really good math in that problem. It's got some logs in it. It's got some good algebra in it. It's got some formulas, making sure you knew it was geometric. So that's a really good problem for them to choose to put on your exam because it covers a bunch of topics. Number 52, it says the first term, infinite, is a 2. So I know my a sub 1 is a 2. I know the sum is 6, and I want the common ratio, so I'm looking for R. We are infinite, so for this formula, which again is given to you, my sum is 6. My first term is 2. I'm going to multiply both sides by 1 minus R. Those are going to cancel. You do have to distribute the 6 here, so that's going to give me 6 minus 6R equals 2. And then just solve for R. That's going to give me 2/3. Okay, now we're headed to 53. It says what's true. Let's see. I'm multiplying by 3/4. So my R is 3/4. It is infinite. So I can use, and it's talking about converging or diverging, so I can just look at my sum. Because my R is less than 1, I know I converge. So I don't keep getting bigger, so I don't diverge. I'm going to do my first term over 1 minus my R. And then 4 pi. And again, that formula is on your formula sheet. Now I'm going to number 54. Okay, this one we struggled with this one. These recursive formulas. Remember, n is the chair that you're in. A sub n is the person that's in that chair. N minus 1 is the chair before you. And again, n is the chair that you're in. Tells me that a sub 5 is 407. So in the 5th chair sits 407, and I want a sub 1. Okay, so I'm going to use this formula, and this one's a pain in the butt, but it's very doable. Okay, so this is going to be a sub 5, which I know is 407. Okay, equals, now a sub n minus 1 is going to be a sub 4, the chair before it, plus 3 times, and then a lot of people get right here and they get confused as to whether this is a 5 or a 4. Remember, this is a sub n, and that was a 407, and that's the 5th chair. So my n is 5. And that's going to be 15 minus 1 is going to be 14. I'm going to subtract the 14 over. Okay, so now I'm just going to go again. So now I'm going to use this formula, but I'm going to go with 393. That's going to be the term before the 4th term. I'm in the 4th chair. That's 12 minus 1 is 11. I'm going to subtract the 11 over, and that gives me 382. And that's a sub 3. So a sub 2, I'm in the 3rd chair. 3 times 3 is 9. Minus 1 is 8. Subtract the 8 over. That gives me 374. And then I just got to go one more time. 374, a sub 1 now, plus 3 times 2nd chair minus 1. That's a 6. Minus 1 is a 5. Subtract a 5 over, and we get 369. Some of these problems are super quick, and some of them aren't. And so when you get to one that isn't, you just have to stay the course and see it all the way through and don't give up on it. Okay, number 59. Number 59 wants the explicit formula for this. Okay, and it tells me that my first term is 1. So that's my first chair. I'm going to go ahead and find the first couple by using this formula right here. So if I want to know who's sitting in the 2nd chair, I'm going to do a sub n minus 1. That's going to be the 1. 2 times, and again I'm talking about the 2nd chair, so that's going to be 2 minus 1, which is 1. So that's going to make him a 3. And then if I go again, I'm now in the 3rd chair. So a sub n minus 1, that's going to be the 3, the guy before us. N is my 3. So that's a 2, so that's a 4, so he's a 7. And I just keep going. I get a 13 and a 21. And then it wants to find a formula that ties the number to its chair. And guys, because these are explicit, you can take all of these and type them in and practice this. Take all these and type them into your y equals, and then go to your table and see which one gives you the correct list of numbers. Answer's B. But take a second and just plug those in so that you're familiar with how to do that. And I can do that because I can plug these into my y equals. When they give me this stuff, I can't plug that into my y equals because I can't do the n minus 1. But all these are fine. Okay, we're going to number 60. Series is shown below. Let's see. These are getting smaller. Looks like I'm multiplying by 2/5 each time. So we definitely don't diverge. We're getting smaller because my r is smaller than 1. And so we're going to converge, but now we need to figure out what we converge to. So I'm going to use the formula. A sub 1 is 1. My r is 2/5. So 5/3. So there's a couple questions about converging and diverging. So I would expect to see some of those. So now we're headed to number 71. Okay, and this one's kind of like the one we did a minute ago. I'm going to take this formula right here. It gives me my first one. And I'm just going to use this formula to find the rest of the numbers sitting in the chairs. So if I try spot number 2, let's see, that's 2 times the term before it. So that'd be 6, 7, 8, 9. And then the third one would be 2 times the one before it. So that's 18 plus 3 is 21. And then if I keep going, that's a 45. And I'm just going to stop there. And then if I'm looking for the explicit formula, this, again, all of these are something I can plug into my y equals. So I'm going to plug all these into my y equals. And I'm going to go check my table. And I'm going to find the table that produces those numbers when x is 1, 2, 3, and 4. And it turns out to be A. All right, and then we're going to look at number 72. I want the sum, infinite. Okay, now you have to be able to read this and see that to get to the next term, I'm taking this term and I'm timesing it by 0.8. So this is geometric with an R of 0.8. So you have to be able to interpret what that means. Okay, so now the sum formula for geometric is easy. So first term, and so this is going to be, if you do this in one swoop on your calculator, please make sure you put that in parentheses. And you're going to get 125,000. 72. Okay, now we're going to 80. Geometric. I want the first 20 terms. I'm given a first term and an R. Okay, so this is not infinite. It stops at 20 terms, so we're geometric. But our sum formula is not the infinite. Okay, so my first term is 12. My root 2, going 20. My R is root 2. Answer's 29636.9. But please take a second and type that in. Pause the video, take a second, type that in, and make sure you're good with how to type that in on your calculator. The worst thing is to have all the math right, but not know how to work the technology that you have available. Okay, so now we're going to go to number 83. I want the sum. It gave me the formula. That was very nice of them. It's given me, and then it gives me this. So I can tell that I'm starting with 8 and I'm multiplying each one by negative 1/7. And it looks like I've done this because it's to the, so I've done it 2,500 times. So that's going to be my R. I mean, that's going to be my N. My R is my negative 1/7 because that's what I'm multiplying each time. And my N is going to be my 2,500. So first term, oh, and this is a really good one. Oh, wait, too many zeros. Okay, now let's talk about this plus plus. I can plus plus down here, and then put that in parentheses and type that straight in. You cannot plus plus right here because this negative 1/7 has to get raised to that power first. So you need to be super, super, super careful typing this in. Answer 7, but I want you to take a second and type this in and make sure you're okay. Watch your parentheses. Okay, now we're going to 85. Okay, so we have an investment. $2,000 is our starting amount we earn, so we're adding 3.2% each year. $150 is added at the end of each year. Calculate the investment balance. Okay, so my B sub 0 is 2,000. That's my starting amount. So I know he's out, and he's out. Every year I'm adding 150. So I like both of those. So what's the difference between these? One has a 1 in it, one doesn't. When we talked about this, we talked about when you get to add your 3.2%, it's not just 3.2%, it's 103.2% because the 100 is what you already had. Then you get to add the 3.2 interest. So you end up with 103.2%. If you just did 3.2% of your money and that's it, then all you're doing is finding how much you are making, not how much money you have. So to do how much money you have to add that 100. You get to keep 100% of what you have. So the answer is D. Okay, now we're going to go to 93. Okay, my R is just a 0.1. It's infinite. So first term over 1 minus my R. Very carefully type that in. And then if you can go math fraction, it'll tell you that it's 10/9, which is 1 1/9. Okay, now we're going to 95. Recursive starting amount is 7. If my U sub 0, my starting amount is 7, I know I want to start with a plain 7. So these are out. And then you can tell that you're going to add 12 every time. That should be your slope. Think about it like y-intercept. You're going to add 12 every time. So I'm going to start with 7 and add 12 every single time. It's 95. Now we're going to 96. This one gets bigger and bigger and bigger, so it definitely does not converge. So these are out. The series diverges because the limit of the sequence as n approaches infinity is infinity. The series diverges because the limit, okay, you can't diverge to 30. You can only diverge to infinity. If you're going to 30, then you're converging. So it can't be him. And again, honestly, that's just testing your vocabulary. 97. Which statement is true about the 5th term So for this one, you can just find a sub 5 by doing 3 times 25 minus 6 and getting 69. For this one, start with 10, and then 10 minus 6 would be 4, times 3 would be 12, and then the third term would be, let's see, this would be a 12. 12 minus 6 would be 6. 6 times 3 is 18. And 18 minus 6 is 12, and 12 times 3 is 36. And do it one more time and you get a 90. So I'm comparing 69 to 90. Okay, now, so the difference is 21. But to pick between these two, you've got to know who's recursive and who's explicit. Recursive depends on the guys before you, and that's what this is doing. So he's recursive. He's explicit. I could go straight and find the fifth term easy peasy. I didn't have to find the first and the second, the third, and the fourth to get to the fifth. That's recursive. So let's see who's bigger. Recursive. So the recursive exceeds explicit. So it would be C. All right, and then we're going 98. What's true? It's getting smaller and smaller, so I know I converge. And I converge because my R is less than 1, multiplying by half. You're not going to converge if your R is bigger than 1, because your numbers are going to be getting bigger. And the last one we need to do is number 100. What is the recursive formula? When they do these, and we talked about this in class, I can't plug these into my y equals and see which one spit those out on the table, because you can't plug in this n minus 1 stuff in your calculator. So you have to do these by hand. These are the ones that take a while. If I were you, I would start with D, and I would start with the numbers far down the sequence, because odds are these guys are all going to work for the first couple of numbers because they're trying to make you work. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I'm going to try the 6th spot and see if I get a 56, and I'm going to try D. So that would be, we'll tell you what, I'm going to try the 5th spot. So that would be 42. And then n minus 1 would be the guy before it, so that would be 30 plus 2 times, and then n, I was in the 5th spot, so 5 plus 1 gives me 6, and that's a 12, and 12 plus 30 is 42. So he works for that one, and then you're just going to keep trying, and he ends up working for them. And then if you test this, the 5 and the 42 on him and him and him, none of them work. So again, that's just one of those problems that takes some time, but it could be the difference between, you know, B and a C on the exam for you. There are not tons of questions on this exam, so you need to get the ones you know how to do, get them right. Don't miss it because you were too lazy to do the work. Okay, so that's it for series and sequences. Now we're going to run through the parametric real quick. So we're going to pop back to number 22. And I was very impressed with how many of you got this one right, or the one that was like this one, on the quiz, or yeah, the quiz. Remember the plane. Okay. 40 degrees north of east. North of east. He goes 110 miles per hour for 2 hours. That makes him go 220 miles. And then, this is just your north, south, east, west. Then he's going to adjust his path, and he's going to go 10 degrees west of north. So I go north, and then I go west of north, 10 degrees. And he goes that direction for half an hour, so 30 minutes at 100 miles an hour, so that's a 50. And I want his distance. I can tell this is not a right triangle, guys. This is just law of cosines. I've got one side. I want this side. I know this side. So if you think law of cosines, you just need this included angle. Okay, so you just got to remember a little geometry. If you have this line right here, this line right here, cut by that. Alternate interior angles are the same. So if he's 40, so is he. And if he's 10, then I know this is 80 because that's a right angle. And if that's 80 and that's 40, that is 120, and now you're good to go. So I'm going to say x squared equals 50 squared plus 220 squared minus 2 times 50 times 220 cosine of 120. I'm going to type all that in. I'm going to square root it, and I'm going to get 248.8. That was 22. Now we're headed to 28. 28, these are the ones that, I don't know, for some reason we really struggle with these. But guys, they're just formulas. They're not on your formula sheet. You do need to know them. They're on that sheet where you have to stare at that I gave you. I want the rectangular coordinates for the polar coordinate. If he's the polar coordinate, then I know that r is 5 and theta is 30 degrees. You have to know. And these are the 4 formulas you absolutely 100% have to have memorized. Have to. If that's rectangular and I want, no, if that's polar and I want rectangular, then I want an x and a y. Well, in class I said, which equation poops out an x and a y? And it's these two. So x equals r, which is 5, cosine of 30 degrees, and y equals r, which is 5, sine of 30 degrees. Your answers are all decimals. Go straight to your calculator, make sure you're in degrees, and just straight up type that in. That one's going to give you 4.33. That one's going to give you 2.5. Guys, that's not difficult, but you have to know those formulas. Okay, now we're headed to 34. Again, these are polar, so that's r and that's theta. I want rectangular, so I want x and y. So x equals 6 cosine of 4 pi over 3, and y equals 6 sine of 4 pi over 3. And if your brain is fried and you don't want to think unit circle, which is really easy, ugly, pretty, ugly, except you be negative. You can do it that way and not ever go decimals, but you can just straight up type this in and get a decimal, and straight up type that in and get a decimal, and then type these guys in and get your decimal. That's, you know, that's fine. And the answer is, hold on, that's not 4 pi over 3. That's 1 1/3. He's here. I'm sorry. That's 4 pi over 3 because it's more than, this one's 2 pi over 3. So this would be both negative. And honestly, guys, let's look at your answers. If you know that both of these are negative, so you know that this is going to be negative and this is going to be negative, look at your choices. This is the only one where both of them are negative. But again, you can type this straight in and you'll get a -3, and type this straight in, you'll get a decimal, and then type that in, you'll get the same decimal. But again, know those formulas. Okay, and then 35, we're going to go back the other way. This is an x and a y, and I want an r and a theta. So I need to use this formula and this formula. So r squared equals 16 plus 81. So r equals root 97. And tangent of theta, this is the one we messed up on, equals 9 over 4. So you tangent inverse your answer to get your theta. And he's 66 and some change. Know those formulas. Just stare at them. Stare at them today. Stare at them tomorrow morning. and you should be fine. All right, we're headed to number 40. Okay, this is a good one, and you're probably going to see something like this on here. Don't guess. You guys know how to do this. I'm going to multiply both sides. And those are going to cancel. And then I'm going to take my R and I'm going to distribute it. Okay. Now, I know that this right here is Y. And I'm going to replace the R with this formula. And that's R squared, so R is going to equal the square root of that. Nope, not equals. Okay, now I need to get rid of my root. So I need to move everything away from the root. And I'm going to divide it by 16. And then I'm going to square both sides. And that's going to give me 64 minus 2,000 y plus 625 y squared all over 256. Now, I can see that I have an x squared and a y squared, so I know I'm not a parabola. I have an x squared here, and I have a y squared here and here. That 256 is under everybody, so he's also under that y squared. So what I really just need to know is, once I get my y squareds on the same side, if they're both positive, if my x squared and my y squared are both positive, then I'm either an ellipse or a circle. If my x squared stays positive, but my y squared is negative, then I know I'm a hyperbola. So what I did in my calculator, I did 15,625 divided by 256. And it gives you this large number. Well, when you subtract that over and you subtract it from 1, this answer is going to be negative something y squared. And really, that's all I care about, because now I know I'm a hyperbola. Now, if they were both positive, we would be an ellipse because my coefficients would be different. The only way you're a circle is if they're both positive and they have the same coefficient. This is both positive and a different coefficient. This is one positive and one negative. And a parabola is when just one of them is squared. So if I move my y squared over and they canceled and only had an x squared, then I would be a parabola. And you're really probably going to see one like that. Okay, 46. 46 is the wind one. You've got a wind that's blowing from the northwest towards the southeast. So there's your wind. The vector has an eastward component. It's going east of 5 miles per hour and a southward component that's going 15 miles an hour. And I want to know the angle that the wind is blowing. I'm just going to do tangent of theta equals a negative 15 because this is down over positive 5 because this is going to the right. And when I do that, I get an angle of negative 71.6 degrees. Now, and that's there. So that's very tempting. Okay, but if you think about what you know about an angle, negative 71 degrees is this. That's this angle right here. That's negative 71.6 degrees. All of these answers are talking about east of south. Okay, so let's think about it. Here's south. East of south is that angle right there. So all I have to do is subtract that from 100 or from 90 degrees. And I know that that angle is 18.4. Okay, 58. 4 more to go, guys. 58, and this is a really, really good one. one that you're probably going to see. It's not difficult, but if you don't just take time and let it soak in, you're not going to know how to do it. Okay, I know this. Okay, when we did something like this, we said, okay, we're going to solve one for t, and we're going to plug that into the other one. The problem is, this is cosine of t, so I can't get t by itself. But there are also sines and cosines involved, and normally when we do these problems, there aren't. So what I'm going to remember is this relationship. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to solve for cosine of t by itself. So I'm going to subtract the 3, and then I'm going to divide by 5. Okay, I'm going to do the same thing for my sine. So y plus 1, and then divide by 5. Okay, now I'm going to use my relationship that I know that that one squared plus that one squared. Now look, it's talking about a circle. We'll see how both these 5s are the same. I know I'm a circle. The question says, what's the center? Well, the center would be positive 3, negative 1. Easy. Easy, easy, easy. But you've got to remember this relationship that links them together. And remember what a circle looks like as far as its formula goes. Okay, headed to 67. Okay, polar coordinates. So these are x's and y's. So I want an r and a theta. So my r formula, okay, so r squared equals negative 2 root 3 squared plus 2 root 3 squared. So that would be 4, and that would be a 3. So this is a 12. And that would be a 4, and that would be a 3. So that would be a 12. 24. So r equals 4 times 6, so 2 root 6. Okay. Now I need to do the tangent y over x. So tangent of theta equals 2 root 3 over negative 2 root 3. So that's tangent of theta equals negative 1. Okay, and again, if you don't want to think unit circle, that's fine. But I know my tangents are 1s and negative 1s at my 45. So I know it's going to be here and here because it's got to be negative. So I'm going to look at my angles. And 150, no, 135 is one of my 45s. And 315 is my other 45. Now, again, if that blows your mind, just tangent inverse your negative 1, and that'll give you your 135. And then just add 180 to it to get the other one. So that's 67, and then we got to do 68. Okay, again, this is one of those, you know, what is it? It could have said, what is it? A circle, a parabola, hyperbola, or an ellipse. We're going to do this one the same. This one's a lot simpler. These are going to cancel. I'm going to distribute my r because I know that that is x. I'm going to replace the r, and then I'm going to isolate that guy. Oh, no, sorry, that's backwards. And then I'm going to square both sides. So these are going to fall down. That's going to give me that. Now, stop and look. Your x squareds are going to cancel. So if it was one of those ones where it just says, what is it? I know right now that it's a parabola because it only ends up with a y squared. I want the formula. I know I have a y squared, not an x squared. They're not both squared, so I'm down to C and D. If they want the 4x on this side, I would have to add it over. So it would be C. 68. And then the very last one, 69. This is another one of those ones where it gives me the parametric because it's got t's in it. So I'm going to solve one of them for t and plug it into the other one. Let's see. I'm going to take this guy and solve him for t. So I'm going to do x minus 3. And then I'm going to multiply both sides by 3. And then I'm going to square both sides. Okay. Now I'm going to take that. And I'm going to plug it right there in for that t. So 4, or y equals 4 times 3x minus 9 squared. 1 squared is from here, and 1 squared is from there, minus 7. So now, I know that when it's a power to a power, I multiply. Okay, so I should be done. And they all have the minus 7 on the end, but they have some other stuff going on in the front and in the parentheses. So they've adjusted it somehow. I can tell that I can GCF a 3 out of here. If I do that, it doesn't give me a 12 out here because this 3 is still to the 4th power. Like when I GCF a 3 out of here and he's to the 4th power, it's not a 3, it's really an 81. 3 to the 4th is 81. So then when I take that 81 and multiply it by that 4, I get 324. So I've got my 324, my x minus 3 to the 4th, and then my minus 7. Again, these polar and parametric equations, they're not difficult. They're really not. But you've got to take your time and stick with them and figure them out and make sure you know those 4 formulas.